Hello guys, you're welcome to uComputing's YouTube channel. My name is Eugene, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can deploy Azure container instances using already made custom images from Docker Hub. Now, I have thrown around a lot of terminologies over here. I'm going to take my time and break it down step by step for you, but I'm going to make sure I don't do too much theory so that I don't get you bored. Azure container instances are used in deploying containers in general. So if you want to deploy an application, whether it's web application or a website, instead of getting a full-blown virtual machine and deploying it on it, you can use containers instead. Now, the benefit of using containers over the traditional virtual machines is that it saves you money, because Microsoft, for instance, on their platform charges applications that runs on containers based on the milliseconds that they execute. Unlike virtual machine, Azure container instances do not run on hypervisors. They have container runtime environment that they run on, and it's a platform as a service offering. Now, how do we even use container instances on Azure? First of all, you need to understand that containers are not a Microsoft proprietary technology. It was made by these guys over here, Docker. Okay, so you can install the Docker engine on a desktop and build your own container images if you are a pro, or you can make use of the already made container images on Docker Hub. We're also going to make use of GitHub. So if you don't have a GitHub account, it is highly recommended, if you want to follow along, to just go to github.com and then sign up over there. So before you can use Azure container instances, you need to have something that we call Azure Container Registry. Now, the Azure Container Registry is the location within Azure that you're going to use to pull the already made container images from the Docker Hub. The first thing that you need to do if you want to implement the use of containers is to make sure you create an Azure Container Registry. I've already mentioned what containers are used for. You can use it to host your applications, but I'm going to use it to host a website today, a very simple HTML website, just for proof of concept, so that anybody can understand how containers work. I'm going to take the first step by creating something that we call a resource group. If you don't know what a resource group is, I recommend you to go to docs.microsoft.com to read about resource groups. Okay, now I'll explain it briefly. Resource groups are just logical units that are used to organize and hold resources on Azure. Okay, so anything that is created on Azure, with the exception of this guy over here, has to go into a resource group. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and then go to my portal menu. By default, the Azure portal doesn't look like this. I have customized mine to look this way. If you want to know how I did it, I have a video on YouTube teaching how you can customize your Azure portal. In order to begin, you need to create a resource group. So I'm going to go to the resource group plate, and then as you can see, I have a whole bunch of resource groups over here. Okay, now I have a resource group called containers. Currently it's empty, so that is the resource group I'm going to use. If you don't have a resource group, you can go ahead and click on create here and then follow through the wizard. It's very, very easy. Okay, so that is basically how you can create a resource group. So if you have a resource group, you can just go ahead and go to your home screen and then locate this global search field over here and then enter container registry. Okay, now as you can see on my home screen, I already have container registry here, but if you don't have yours over here, you can go to the global search field and search for registry. Okay, so it comes up with container registry. Now you need to click on that and then go ahead and click on create here. And when you click on create, you can create a new resource group for this container registry, or you can use the existing one. I already have one called uContainers, so I'm going to go for that, and then I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call this registry uComputing, and I'm going to keep it in the East US region. Okay, the SKU that comes with it, we have different SKUs. Okay, I'm going to stick with the standard. I'm going to click here on next to networking, and then we're given access to specify whether we want to give public access or private access to this container registry. Depending on the SKU that you are having, you can switch in between these two, but with a standard SKU, I only have the option to use public. So I'm going to stick with that. Go next. And then again, the encryption option is only available for premium SKUs. So I'm going to leave it at the default. Go next here. I'm not going to specify any tags. I'm going to go next to review and create. And it's as simple as that. Okay, creating your container registry is very straightforward. So I'm going to click on create here and then give it a couple of minutes, and it's done. Once the deployment is complete, you can click on go to resource and have an overview of the container registry that you've created. Okay, now the next step is to populate this container registries repository with images. Okay, because before you can build containers using container instances on Azure, you will need to have some images already imported into your container registry from Docker Hub. To do this, I'm going to click on the Cloud Shell. Now, if this is the first time you're launching your Cloud Shell, you're going to have some prompt asking you to create a small storage account. It's very normal. You can just go ahead and do it. In order to import container images from Docker Hub into your new Azure Container Registry, you're going to have to execute a command. Okay, but before we do that, let's go to Docker Hub and then search for the container image we want to import. Now, there is a whole bunch of container images within the Docker Hub repository. Okay, so when you get into Docker Hub, whether you log in or not, you can just use, there's always a search field over here, you can use it. Okay, or you can click on explore here if you have already logged in, and as you can see, the most popular container images or Docker images are listed over here. Okay, now my favorite is the HTTPD container image. Okay, it allows you to host simple HTTP site, okay, without any hassle. Okay, so that's what we're going to use. So in order to import this into our new Azure Container Registry, we will need to run a command. But before that, I'm going to click on this. Don't forget that you can also search for any Docker Hub container image using the search field over here. I was just fortunate to find the one that I need over here, so I don't need to search. So I'm going to click on it. And there's a whole bunch of commands over here. If you are a newbie on containers, it can be very, very confusing when you get here. But I'm going to show you the simple way to do it. I have my own cheat sheet that I use because there's a lot of commands involved. Okay, so you can follow along in my steps and then get this done. Okay, so first of all, when you get here, this is the trick that I use. Once you click on the container image that you are interested in, you can click on tags here, and then it gives you some brief tag information over here regarding the image that you want to import. It says that this is HTTPD. There's a command here, but I'm not going to execute this on the Azure portal. Okay, it says this is HTTPD:/latest. Okay, so there are different versions of this Docker container image. Okay, the reason why I'm showing you this is that sometimes the latest versions of the Docker container image is unstable. Okay, so I'm going to show you how you can pull this Docker image into your container registry on Azure. When you get into tags, you're looking out for a pull command, but I'm not going to execute this in Azure. We have a specific command in Azure that we use to import container images into the container registry that we have on Azure. I'm going to grab that quickly and dump it here. Now it's quite a long command, but I'm going to take my time and explain to you. Okay, so basically we're going to use the import command, import-az container registry image. We're going to run it in the PowerShell side of the Cloud Shell, not Bash. Okay, this is a PowerShell command. So we're going to run this import-az container registry image space dash registry name. Now this is the Azure Container Registry that we just created, which is uComputing. So I'm going to put in here uComputing. Okay, that's the name of the container registry that I just created. And then you need to also specify the resource group that the container registry resides in. And in our situation, our resource group was uContainer. Okay, so uContainer. PowerShell is kind of case sensitive, so you have to make sure you maintain the upper cases and lower cases. So let's have a look at something. I just want to confirm what I just did so that you don't get confused. When I go to resource groups here, we have uContainers with an S. I nearly made a mistake. So you have to double check this. If you get the resource group name wrong, you're going to get an error. So the resource group name is uContainers. Our Azure Container Registry name is uComputing. And then we need to specify this parameter over here, --source registry URI space docker.io --source image space library /. Now, when you bring this / over here, that is when you need to bring the parameter for your Docker image. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the Docker Hub, and then within the tags tab, we have this parameter over here, HTTP d:\latest. Okay, that is the parameter we need to specify for this image we need to use. Okay, as you can see, when you go through the overview, it is not over here, so you have to come to the tags option, then you pick it up from here, and you don't pick the whole thing. Okay, if you want to follow along with what I'm doing, you just pick the second half of it, this one over here. Okay, the same applies to other images that you have on Docker. Okay, if you want to import a different image, like let's say Alpine, you come here, you go to tags, and then you don't run this whole command. You just grab Alpine /latest, and then you append it to this command that I have given you. Okay, so this HTTPD is going into a container registry called uComputing inside this resource group. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here so that you can have a proper look. So I think this is enough. Now I'm going to grab this command over here. So I'm going to run this here on our Cloud Shell, the PowerShell side. I'm going to do right click, paste, and I know I'm going to get an error, but I'm going to explain the error in a bit because it's likely for you to face this error. So I'm going to go enter here. Sometimes you do get an error, and I'm going to get the solution for you if this error happens. Okay, we didn't have any error, but if you get an error from here, sometimes it's because you have not enabled any administrator for the container registry. Okay, and this is what you need to do when you come across such an error in yours. After executing this command over here, it will have to do with privileges and permissions. You need to enable an admin user for your Azure Container Registry. Okay, so when you run into an error executing this import command for your new container registry that you've created, I think I've already executed this command. That is the reason why I'm not getting an error. You need to get into the Cloud Shell, the PowerShell side, and then run update-container registry space -name, and then space, the value that you're going to put over here is your Azure Container Registry name, which in our case is uComputing. Okay, and then you're going to put your resource group parameter and then the value of your resource group name, which is in our case containers. You're going to have to remove this whole thing here and then replace it with that. You need to remove this whole thing over here and then replace it with your Azure Container Registry name, and then append this parameter -enable admin user. Okay, once you execute this command, if you press the up arrow on your Cloud Shell, it's going to bring back the previous command, and when you execute, it's going to go through successfully. Now, what this command has done right now is that it has gone to Docker Hub to import the container image for HTTPD for us. Okay, now let's go into our container registry, which is uComputing, and have a look at whether or not the command worked. So I'm going to click on our container registry here and then go to repositories. Now when I go to repositories, it shows that we have HTTPD container image imported. Now you can delete the repository if you want when you're done with whatever you're doing, but once you import a container from Docker Hub into your container registry, that doesn't mean that you can start using it right away. The next step is creating Azure container instances out of this image that you have imported. So this is more of like a blueprint on which the containers you're going to create will be made from. Okay, so We are done with the container registry, done and dusted. The next thing that we need to do is to go ahead and create a container instance, which is the bucket that is going to run our app. So I'm going to type in here container. If yours is not showing up, you can just type in here container. And as you can see, we have this one over here. That's not what we're going for. We're going for container instances. That's what we're going to work with today. So I'm going to click here container instances and then go ahead and create a container instance. Now when I click on create container instance, I'm going to go ahead and click on resource group, pick my container that I want to place this container instance in, and then give it a name. I'm going to call this one HTTP D01. Okay. And then you can, depending on your requirements, set your region type, the availability zones, and availability options that you want. But when you get to image source, okay, if you're a new person and you have not successfully imported any container image from Docker Hub into your container registry, you can use the quick start images that Azure provides. You can switch to Azure Container Registry here, and as soon as you get to the side, it says something here that uComputing, okay, because that is the only container registry that we have on Azure. Now, I was looking forward to this error message. Okay, as I mentioned earlier on, you're going to come across an error message like this sometimes when you are running the import command. But I didn't get it. I got it here. It says admin user must first be enabled for this registry in order to access blah blah blah. Okay, so the fix for this is what I have just given you. You need to run the update-az container registry command using these parameters. Okay, so I'm going to just fix in here my value for my Azure container registry name. Simple copy and paste. And then put my resource group name, Control C, and Control V, paste. I'll lift this command from here and launch my Cloud Shell. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and Control C here to clear, and then right click and paste. Okay. Now when I paste my command and go for the Enter key, once it's successfully executed, I'm going to minimize this and then go start this from scratch. Okay. I'm going to jump back into container instances and then click on create container instance. You can use this option, you can use that option, anyone works fine, and then restart it all over again. I'm going to select my resource group, give it a name. I'm going to call this HTTP D01 and then leave the default region and availability options. Switch the radio button to Azure Container Registry, and this time around the error has disappeared. Okay, so if you come across that, if you're a first-time user of containers on Azure, that is how you're going to fix it. My one and only container registry has been listed. One and only image I have imported from Docker Hub has been listed, which is HTTPD, and this is the latest version. Okay, I'm going to leave the default OS type to Linux. In fact, when you're dealing with containers, using Linux is better than, I'm sorry, Microsoft. Okay, so the size of your container, you can make adjustment over here if you want. If you know your container is going to be accessed by thousands and thousands of users, you need to give it more compute power. Okay, but this is just for testing, so I'm going to just leave the default. Go next. I'm going to go ahead and specify the networking type. I'm going to place it on public for now. It says it will create a public IP address for my container. This is what I'm looking for. Now, there is an optional requirement over here. You can put in a DNS name. Okay, in my case, I'm going to put in here uComputing, and if it matches the character requirements, everything checks green here. And if you require certain ports to be opened on this container, aside the default or TCP port 80 for HTTP, you can add it here. But in our case, we're going to leave the default, go next here. And then this is a restart policy. In case the container fails, what should it do? The default policy here is restart on failure. Okay, so the container is going to automatically restart when there's a failure. Okay, you can change it always. I'm going to leave the default and go next, and then leave the tags alone, go next, and go ahead and create my first container instance. Once that is done, we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, so the container instance has been created. You're going to click on go to resource here. Within the overview of the container instance, it gives you a couple of options. You can stop the container. Unlike Azure App Service, which even if you stop it, you're still incurring costs. For container instances, when you stop the container from running, it saves you money. Now, it gives us a public IP address over here. It gives us an FQDN, which looks very horrible, by the way. Okay, but this can be changed later, okay, if you're using it for production environment. So I'm going to copy the URL, test it first. When I click here and go paste and go, it says it works. So our container is actually working. The deployment was successful. When you copy the public IP address to when you try, it works fine. This is the easiest part. Now, we know containers can host web apps and websites and other applications. This is a default page on this container instance. What if I have a website and I want to host it within this container? How do I do it? That is where the challenge begins, okay? But I'm going to show you the easiest way to do it. Most people build their own images using a Docker engine on their desktop with their application and everything in it, and then push it to Azure's container registry. When it goes into the container registry and they use that image they have pushed to the container registry, already made by themselves, containing their web pages and web apps, and then they use it to create a container instance, automatically they get their result, okay? But if you're not good at building your own images using a Docker engine, then you can use the already made Docker container images and then tweak it to suit your need, okay, like what we are about to do. So how do we even get access to the internal part of this container instance? Now, when I scroll down here, you see that we have settings. When I click on containers here, we have the option here to, first of all, check the status of the container. It says that the container is running, which is good. When you come here, it has stopped. Whoever that is accessing pages or apps from this container will not have access to it. Okay, so you have to make sure it's always running. And then when you go to properties, it gives you a brief information about how the ports have been configured, how much CPU and stuff you have on it. When you go on logs here, it basically shows you activities that is happening on this container. Now, in order to get access to the internal part of this container, you need to go to connect, and then you can select bash shell and click on connect. Now when you click on connect, it gives you a CLI giving you access to the container. Okay, now this page that we are looking at over here is running on a lightweight OS in this container. Okay, and when I go to containers here in the settings and click connect and I enter my shell, this is the OS that is running the container. Text-based OS is a Linux OS using a Linux kernel. Okay, now when I list the directory content of this terminal-based OS for this container by doing ls, it tells me we have a couple of folders over here, and we have this folder called htdocs. Okay, now htdocs in terms of web servers is basically the directory where web pages are kept, okay, if you're hosting a site. So this website that we are looking at right now is running inside this directory. Okay, so we're going to change directory into it by doing htdocs and then press enter here. Now when I do ls again and press enter, it tells me we have index.html, and it's this index.html that is actually doing this math. Okay, so if we want to replace this whole thing with a production website or a project that we have developed ourselves, then we need to find a way to push our code into this directory. Okay, which is what I'm about to show you next. I do have a website over here that I have developed. I'm not a very powerful developer. So I made a simple HTML site, okay, that we're going to push into this container and make it accessible to the world. So I'm going to just double click this so that we can have a view of how this site looks like. It's supposed to be a finance system, so it's not a full-blown finance system, okay, it's just a blueprint, okay, as you can see. So when I click on home, I click on transaction, I click on this, I click on check balance, everything is working fine. Now, how do we get this, our already developed site, into this container on Azure? That is when GitHub comes in. You can go to GitHub and then sign up using your email address, log in, and then once you log in, it gives you the option to create something like a code repository. Okay, I already have an account on GitHub, so I've signed in with my credential. If you sign in with your credential, all you need to do is to click here, create repository. If you haven't used GitHub before, it's pretty straightforward. You click on create repository and then you give it a name. I'm going to call this uPublic, okay, because I'm going to make it accessible to the general public. Okay, if you want to make it private, you can just switch the radio button from here to private, but I'm going to make it public because if you are a new user on GitHub and you put it on private, authentication gets in and you have to put in username and password and it gets more sophisticated. But for demonstration's sake, if you want to try this, you can just leave it on public and go create your repository. Now, once your repository is created, I know if you are not a developer, this looks very scary, but don't worry. I'm going to take you through it step by step. So once the repository is created, for some reason, if you hit this button over here again and you are lost, okay, you can go ahead and then click on the repository that you just created and it takes you back to the same place. What you need to do is that you need to install GitHub desktop version, okay, and then you can go ahead and set it up here. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new tab here, go to google.com and then search for GitHub. When I click on GitHub desktop, it's going to give me an option to download the desktop version of GitHub. Once it's done, I'm going to get it installed and I'm going to show you how you can push your code. So I'm going to click on GitHub desktop to execute it. GitHub desktop is being installed, as you can see down here. Once the installation completes, it's going to give you the chance to sign into GitHub. Okay, the same credential that you used initially to sign in on the web, you can use the same thing here. So I'm going to click on sign into GitHub and then click allow and click open. Now it signs me in automatically into my GitHub because I have already signed in on the web. So I'm going to click on finish here and then it tells me you do have a repository, right? So I'm going to click on my repository here and then click on clone my repository. When I click on clone repository, it is going to go into a local path within my documents folder and create a clone there for me. So I'm going to click on clone here. Once this is done, you can just minimize your browser and go look for the directory, or you can click on show in Explorer here and it's going to take you to the directory that has been created to serve as a clone for your GitHub repository. Once you gain access into this cloned directory, you can just open up your web root on your local machine, copy your code, and then paste it in here, right? The next thing that you need to do is you need to go back into your GitHub desktop and then commit your changes to the main code repository, okay? Now, I'm going to give it a summary here by saying version 1.0 and click commit to main. This is going to make sure the files that I've just placed in there will be prepared for push, okay? Now when I click on publish here, branch, it's going to push the code that I have placed in the directory for my GitHub on my desktop, which is this one over here. It's going to make sure it is pushed to the cloud or the web one. Okay, how do I know it has been pushed? When I go to view on GitHub here on my GitHub desktop, it's going to take me to a directory where my code is residing. So my code is online now. Once you get it into GitHub, the next step is pulling it from GitHub into this HTDocs on your Azure container instance. Okay, some container instances support GitHub, but in my case, this container instance doesn't support GitHub. So we will need to install GitHub using the apt command. So I'm going to grab my command and paste it. The first thing that you need to do in your container instance before you use GitHub is to install Git if it doesn't already exist. So before you install it, you need to run apt update. Some container instances require that you use sudo in front of the command. So if you execute it and it's not working, just put sudo in front of the command before you execute. So I'm going to run apt base update, go enter, and then go ahead and install my Git. This will enable us to run Git commands here. So I'm going to get Git installed by pressing capital Y here, go enter, and get Git installed. I'm going to run ls here. It tells us we have index.html, which is what is currently running the default web page. Okay, I don't want that, so I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to do rm index.html, enter to get rid of it. I'm going to do ls again. As you can see, it's gone. Okay, Now, the next step is to use git command to pull my code from here into this directory. So I'm going to use the clone command, git clone command, to pull my source code from GitHub into this htdocs directory. So I'm going to just copy this and paste it here. Now, if the first command that we use to install Git doesn't work, if you try to execute this command, it's going to fail. Okay, so you need to make sure Git has been installed. Okay, this is going to go through my GitHub. This is my GitHub name, and this is my software repository. And I'm going to press enter here to retrieve my code from my code repository. Now it's been transferred from GitHub into htdocs, so I'm going to just run ls here to see the content of this directory. Now it tells me that it has transferred uPublic directory. Okay, now this in a testing environment is okay, but in production environment is not good, because let's have a look. I'm going to refresh this. When I refresh, it just shows the directory uPublic. Then when you click on it, the page loads. That's not what you want. You want basically the site to load your app directly when somebody goes onto this address here. So I'm going to fix this. Let's fix it together. I'm going to go back to the Azure portal, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just copy the content, all the content from the public directory that has just been placed here into htdocs. So this is what I'm going to do. Put together a command. So I'm going to copy my command and then just put it in here. Okay, I'm going to explain to you. So this cp command is just for copying. So you're going to add this -r parameter, and then it's going to go through my directory. As you can see, this directory matches what we have over here: USR, local, Apache, htdocs, uPublic. Okay, so uPublic is inside htdocs, and what this command is going to do is that it's going to go into this source. You make sure you bring / means all. That means I pick everything in the uPublic folder and then dump it in htdocs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. Paste it here and then go enter. Okay, it does that. Now let me do ls over here. As you can see, our pages that we need for our application to run, including the index.html, the new version is up and running. So if somebody goes to this container's public IP address or FQDN, it should load the website. Now when I copy this and then paste it here, it loads my site. Okay, so this can be a full-blown website with CSS and JavaScript and everything, and it's going to load fine. This is basically how you can host your web apps and your website in an Azure container instance with the help of GitHub, okay, and Docker Hub. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you like this video, please like it and share with your friends and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll see you in the next video.